This is our second live and in-person inspiration session, specially curated by Bolton-Alarcón of Special Source Training. Our guest speaker is Evie Manuel, Managing Director of the London-based immersive agency, The Department. Evie started her career at the creative events agency Full Circle, joining the business as an events assistant. 7 years later, she was appointed the Managing Director, which is where she remained for a further 4 years, helping to steer the business to great success. Evie's going to talk about the history and impact of imposter syndrome. She'll be looking at how reframing and leaning into the feelings of self-doubt can actually help you. Evie's had her own share of self-doubt during her meteoric career journey, which is why she's the perfect person to give this talk. The Venue Group create hospitality concepts across the world that are built on the power of experience. Goods Way is their King's Cross venue, which is where this podcast is recorded with a live audience.
So welcome Evie to stage. So close.
I haven't quite had anyone call my career history meteoric. And it sounds very impressive when you kind of put it all together and make it sound all flashy. And I think that's probably why they've asked me here tonight, because over the years, I've worked very closely with Peter, the lovely Peter Kerwood, who everyone should definitely know. And myself and Peter have had lots of conversations about our career and what we've been doing, and talked a lot around the issues of self-doubt and imposter syndrome. So tonight, during our session, I'm going to spend 45 minutes to an hour not talking at you. It's going to be very interactive, and I would really love you all to, as much as possible and as much as you're comfortable with, share with the group. It's like a therapy session, you know? We're going to get it all out, leave it all here, and then go out and smash life. That's my plan. Woo! Yes. So my aim is to help you to understand your imposter thoughts and the idea of self-doubt and what it means specifically for you, but also on a wider scale as well. And to give you some very practical tips for managing and reframing what that means for you. To start, what I'd love for you to do, if you've come from work and you've got a notepad and a pen in your bag, I'd love for you to get it out. If you haven't, can you grab your phone? But I'm going to make you put it on airplane mode so you do not get distracted. And I'd like you to open up your notes. Everyone looks really scared. Don't worry, it's not intense. I promise you, you will be fine. You'll make it out the other side of this. So you don't have to start writing just yet, but I just want you to have it to hand because it will come in handy throughout the session. So can I just get a sense of the room? I mean, I know that you all understand what the topic is that we're covering here, but what I'd love to understand is who in this room has or is dealing with self-doubt or imposter syndrome. Okay, that's pretty much everyone. Well, that's good, because hopefully this will help you. So you are definitely not the only ones. I'm sure that you know that everyone that you know, love, work with, people around you have probably had the same thoughts and self-doubt. And actually 70% of people, 84% of entrepreneurs, and 80% of CEOs feel out of their depth or have done at some point. So it's pretty common. It's most people. And actually, I think at the start of this year's Elevate cohort, you were asked a few questions, and it turns out that 72% of the whole cohort this year has had moments of imposter syndrome. And most of those were actually mentors rather than mentees. If you Google the term, how do I deal with imposter syndrome, you'll get about 7 million results. So it's pretty common. It's not just you in this room and me. And actually the term imposter syndrome was actually called the imposter phenomenon. And it came out of a study back in the 1970s by two women called Clarence and Imes, who noticed that the women around them, highly successful women who were doing incredibly well in their work life, in their home life, in the tests that they were taking at the college that they were working in, often talked about the fact that they felt out of their depth, they felt like they didn't deserve it, and when they went into something, they were convinced that they were going to fail. And they described the imposter phenomenon as an internal experience of intellectual phoniness. feeling like you don't belong, feeling like you don't deserve to be where you are. In the 1970s, when this study came out, you can understand why they felt like that. Women hadn't been in the workplace for that long. Just a caveat, I know that there are also men in this room. I am going to talk about women and imposter syndrome a little bit, but I promise you that it's not just all geared towards women. And I understand that a lot of men also feel it. So just this little section, and then we'll go on. But back in the 1970s, it was important for women to actually assimilate into the workplaces because they were going into environments that were not set up for them and were predominantly male. Mary Portas, anyone know Mary Portas, Queen of Shops? Yeah. She talks about the fact that she wore incredibly masculine outfits and she adopted a really dominant approach to her management style, where she later realised that it wasn't natural for her and she didn't enjoy doing it that way, so she changed it. But when she first went into the workforce around that time, that's what she had to do to get by and to get to where she did. And Margaret Thatcher reportedly took vocal coaching sessions to lower her tone so that she would come across more masculine and so that she could be more dominating in a room full of men, mostly. And it isn't just women that have dealt with imposter syndrome. It's actually more prevalent with people of colour, people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, basically people who are underrepresented and marginalised. And they're actually people that have often been told that they don't belong. So imposter syndrome hasn't just happened. It doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes from a feeling of not feeling like you belong in a space. There's actually a term called stereotype threat, and they did a study of it in 1995, where they had two groups of people, women and African-American people. And in the two groups, one group beforehand, they were told the stereotypes around their own demographic. So people from African-American backgrounds were not necessarily academic or good at presenting, and females were not good at maths. The group that were told those stereotypes beforehand actually performed far worse than those that weren't told that beforehand. And so the study showed that if you were told your stereotype and it was reinforced to you, it actually affected your performance. So over the years where certain people have been made to feel like they don't belong, you can understand why they then don't belong. So when we have these feelings, it's really important to understand where they come from. So there's a book called Playing Big, which if you have time, I would highly recommend getting a copy of, and have a couple here actually to give away. So if you're super vocal and you join in, you might get a free book out of it. Woohoo! But what she basically talks about in this book is that over the years, women have had to play small out of safety. So throughout the generations, women have been penalised and actually threatened if they were too vocal, accused of being witches. Even now, there are women that are put in prison or hurt or murdered because of the way that they behave and because they are vocal. So it's important to remember that. This book is incredibly good because what it does is it gives you loads of helpful tips. It gives you context of what you're dealing with. And even if you're not a woman, you can still get some value out of it. So I'd still recommend reading it. Boys. Sorry. But one of the things that she does is, one of the tips that she talks about is getting really curious about where those feelings of self-doubt come from and why you feel them. So that's what we're going to do now. So I promise this is all not going to be too woo-woo, but if I could get everyone in the room to just sit up straight and sit comfortably. I would like you to put your hands in your lap, or if you'd like to, you can put one hand on your belly and one hand on your chest. And now I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Don't worry, nothing bad is going to happen, I promise you. I would like you to think about the last time you felt like an imposter or you had a moment of self-doubt. Now hold the image in your mind and try and summon the feelings that you had in that moment. What outcome were you most afraid of? And what was it that made you think that you couldn't do it or that you were going to fail? And so this is part of the story that you're telling yourself every time you have a moment of self-doubt. So I'd like you to open your eyes. And I'd like you to just take a minute and write down what it was, what the story was that you were telling yourself about why you were going to fail. How did that feel? And understanding where your feelings come from is really important, as it gives you context, and it helps you to understand what you're feeling and therefore how you challenge it and how you fix it and how to use it to your advantage. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. If you hadn't noticed, I hail from East London. I grew up in the East London area. I went to school in Bow, which is very bougie now, but definitely wasn't back in the day. And I am also dyslexic. And I found school really difficult because I didn't really engage with a lot of the academic subjects, obviously. And I loved performing arts, dance, all of that kind of stuff. But as soon as I had to go in and write something or learn grammar and all of that kind of stuff, I found it really difficult. And I didn't want to do it. I tried to get out of it. Obviously, you have to do all the subjects, especially English. So I had to force myself to do it, and I had to find ways around it. Actually, there's a company called Made by Dyslexia, who campaigned to have dyslexic thinking added into the dictionary, because the way that your brain works when you're dyslexic is completely different. And it's the same for anything like autism, ADHD, any kind of neurodivergent brain. You have to learn to deal with normal day-to-day activities in a very different way. So that is exactly what I did. But when I went into my first proper job at Full Circle, I went into a team of 5 brilliantly creative, super dysfunctional, unorganized men. And I was like this 21-year-old, cocky, well, just loud and East London girl. And I was like, oh, why are you doing that? Where does this go? How can I file this? Like, where do I save that? And they were like, oh, we just sort of get it on and then it goes over there and then it sort of happens. And I was like, okay, that's great. But the way that dyslexia shows up for me is that I really need clarity and I need to understand how things work and what they mean. And so going into Full Circle, what I did was constantly try and add a bit of structure and add a bit of organisation. I kid you not, my boss, Rich, would run around at Christmas across 12 venues with these 3 massive giant folders filled with all of our artists, like POs, contracts, contact numbers. And he would carry them around to all of the venues. And I was like, dude, you need to get these online. We need to be able to access these, not in a folder. Took me 4 years, but he finally did it. But by questioning how we were working and by looking for ways to fix it and solve the issues that we were experiencing and pushing for it, because I needed it myself, it actually helped me to progress. And they gave me a lot of freedom in the role. So I was very lucky. So Jodie Comer, the actress, everyone know her? Yeah? She's from Liverpool, quite a poor area in Liverpool, and she's talked about the fact that when she first went into acting, she tried to change her accent from the Liverpudlian accent because she didn't fit. She felt that if people heard that she was from Liverpool, that they wouldn't respect her and that she didn't fit in. But it's been brilliant for her because she's doing a pretty amazing job in Killing Eve with a Russian accent. So it worked out well for her. So the first step in tonight's rethinking process of how to change your mindset around imposter syndrome is to normalize the feelings of self-doubt. Everyone here feels them, everyone outside, everyone in the world pretty much, so, well, 70% of them anyway, and celebrities do as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play you a little clip from the brilliant Viola Davis, multi-award winning actress, who's spoken about her struggles with feeling like she doesn't belong and feelings of imposter syndrome.
So I know the language of the artist, and the language of the artist is someone's going to find me out. I may not be as great as people think I am.
Classic imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
They're going to find me out.
And anybody who even wants to be great has that. Anybody, any filmmaker, any writer, any actor. But what it does is, of course, you have to have a healthy sort of approach to it. You have to recognize it for what it is. You have to keep it in its place. But what it does on a healthy level, it keeps you humble and it keeps you working.
Does everyone agree with that? Yeah. So you got to feel it, but you've still got to do it. When you feel these moments of self-doubt, you are then pushing yourself to go through them. And then on the other side, you're like, oh yeah, that wasn't too bad. So it's putting it into perspective. So the long-term rewards definitely outweigh the short-term pain. This is why I've got a bit of an issue with the term imposter syndrome. So as I said earlier, if you Google it, there's millions and millions of people that are talking about imposter syndrome, how to solve it. I think at every conference there's some kind of talk, like here, about how to get over imposter syndrome. And the term imposter syndrome, as we talked about, when they first established it, it was actually called a phenomenon. And the word imposter syndrome implies that it's it's some sort of long-term condition. And it's not. It's just a moment in time. And that is our second step, is to remember that it's temporary. It's not here to stay. You're not going to die, and you will get through it, and you'll probably feel much better about it on the other side. So acknowledging that it's a moment will help your brain to recognize the feelings are temporary. But to be able to do that, what you need to do is understand how you react to self-doubt in the moment. So there's 4 Ps of self-sabotage, and you can let me know if you relate to any of these. So there's procrastination. Yeah? Anyone else? My house is never as tidy as when I've actually got a deadline or something to do, constantly just tidying up or going back and forth from the snack cupboard. We've got perfectionism. And maybe that's what you were dealing with with your sales, where you're like, I've got to smash it. I've got to be amazing. I've got to know everything. Literally, before this talk, I feel like I tried to download everything there is to know about imposter syndrome. I got halfway through that 7 million results page. There's people pleasing. So when you're not feeling confident or you're feeling like an imposter, you feel like if you're going into a meeting and someone says, oh, can you do that? Even if it's not part of your job, you're like, oh, yeah, no, I probably should do that because that probably should be part of my job. And how do I not know that? So I'm just going to say yes to it. So you're just constantly people pleasing. And then there's paralysis. So where you have to deal with something and it's so overwhelming that you're like, I'm just going to not do it. So they're the 4 Ps of self-sabotage. And what I'd like you to do is just jot down one of those that you think resonates with you the most. So it's procrastination, perfectionism, people-pleasing, and paralysis. And people listening on the podcast, so if you're listening, then please do the same. And hopefully you got a notepad and you did all the other exercises as well. So the third step is recognizing your behavior. So I have actually, through writing this talk, realised that I'm a massive procrastinator. And I'll do everything I can to try and distract myself from doing what I need to do and concentrating. So really knowing and understanding in the moment how you react to your own self-doubt then allows your brain to remember, oh, I'm doing this because I'm feeling that self-doubt. And then you're recognizing that self-doubt. And then you can go through the steps of trying to calm it down and try and change it. Because I hate to break it to you, you're never going to not doubt yourself. You're always going to have those feelings. So the only thing that you can do is try and manage it and try and take steps to change how you react to it. So self-sabotage comes from the fear that you don't deserve to be where you are. And this is where it becomes an issue for you. So if you don't take a minute to recognize what you're doing, and the fact that you're here and you're taking notes, even though I told you to do it, hopefully means that you want to change the way that you think and you want to challenge yourself. And so recognizing your behavior in the moment and taking time to challenge your own thoughts is super important. Another technique for helping you challenge your own thoughts is reminding yourself of your achievements, which isn't always easy when you've got imposter syndrome or you're having an imposter moment, because you don't think that you deserved those achievements and you don't really feel like you got to where you are through hard work and talent. You feel like it was luck, basically. And so we're going to do another little exercise. I'm going to stop talking because I'm sure you've heard enough from me. And what I would like you to do is, with the person next to you, so in pairs, or if we've got any triplets going on, what I would like you to do is to, with your partner, introduce yourself, introduce who you are, and tell them exactly how you got to where you are, within your career, within your life. But the only way that you can tell them how you got here is through your achievements. And you're not allowed to downplay them. You actually have to tell them about all the hard work and all the impressive things that you did and how tough it was and how brilliant you are. You don't have to do all of that, but just tell them some of the achievements that you've had along route to where you are now. And even if you're only just starting out in your career, there will definitely be some, because I guarantee you there are moments where you've worked hard and your talents have shone through, okay? So I'm going to give you 5 minutes in your pairs to just have a little chat with each other. How was that? Great. No, you seem like you're really enjoying it, which is brilliant. Before you forget all of the amazing achievements, can I just ask, in your pairs or threesomes, can one of you tell the other person the achievement that stood out for them? So not your own achievement, but tell the other person what achievement of theirs stood out for them, for you. Did that make sense? Yes. Okay, good. So have you, did the other person tell you what stood out for them? Is that what you all did? And have you written it down? Yeah. That is step number 4 in our process, is to recall your achievements. It's really important to acknowledge what you've actually succeeded in, because we're all on a wheel, right? We're just going through every single day, pushing ourselves, looking forward, looking at our goals, looking at what we want to achieve. And we're not necessarily taking time in the moment to acknowledge what it is that we've done and where we've got to so far and what we've accomplished. So it's good for your brain to think about what you've achieved. And if you can, write it down in the moment as well. When you're feeling like you're smashing it, you're like, wow, that was actually really good. I really enjoyed that. Or I did really well in that thing. And it will help you. And then when you're feeling a bit shitty, then you can go back to that list and you'll be like, oh, yeah, I'm not as bad as I thought I was. So recognizing your achievements is not just good for you. It's good for the people around you, the people that you love, colleagues. If you're a mentor, then it's incredibly good for your mentees. If you're able to speak openly about what you've achieved and what you've done well and where you've worked hard, it will encourage them to do the same. I will caveat that with just bragging. Don't just reel off all the things that you're amazing at and tell someone how good you are, because that's definitely not going to help their imposter syndrome either. if you're not acknowledging what you've achieved, you're also doing a disservice to the people around you who have helped you to achieve that. So, for instance, Peter and I were talking a while ago, and we were talking about where I'd got to in my career and what I'd done. And he was questioning me because I was like, oh, it's not that great. I was sort of winging it every single day. Anyone else feel like they're winging it every single day? Yes. Okay, great. It's not just me. And he sort of questioned me, and he was like, but do you think that they would have put you in that position as managing director if they didn't feel that you could do it? And I was like, oh, there was no one else to do it. I was kind of doing it anyway. So that's why they put me in it. And he was like, but they're pretty smart, right? I was like, yeah, maybe. They are incredibly good businessmen and entrepreneurs, and they do know a bit about what they're doing. They've built several businesses, and they're incredibly successful. So it's quite selfish of me to think, oh, they don't know what they're doing. They just sort of put me in charge of one of their businesses because they didn't have anyone else better. So it's doing a disservice to the people that are trusting you and the people that are helping you with your achievements as well. So recognizing your imposter moment, understanding your form of self-sabotage, recalling your achievements and how you got there, leads me to step number 5, which is feeling the fear and doing it anyway, which is kind of what we're doing already, right? Because I'm guessing that you've all got quite a few achievements, and the way that you achieve those is by taking that self-doubt, acknowledging it, and kind of just pushing through and doing it anyway. I didn't come up with that, by the way. There's a whole book by Susan Jeffers, who's written a book on feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And again, everyone feels that. Dame Judi Dench says she still throws up before going on stage every single time. Like, Ed Sheeran didn't just wake up and be an amazing pop star. He had to go into pubs, singing his song, nobody listening, but he kept pushing himself. And that's the point. You've got to acknowledge what you're feeling and push through it and keep challenging yourself and doing it anyway. And I'm gonna play you a clip by someone far more articulate than I am. The fairy godmother of Imposter Syndrome, she has impostersyndrome.com as her website. I don't know when she got that, but it shows that it's been around for far too long. This is Dr. Valerie Young.
Your body doesn't know the difference between fear and excitement. So as you're walking up to the podium or into the meeting or any place where your confidence is shaky, you have to say to yourself, I'm excited. Okay? I'm excited. Okay? You don't believe it, and that's okay. Because now you know that you don't have to feel confident to act confident. And over time, you really will begin to believe the new thoughts. And when you do, you can stop trying to overcome imposter syndrome and instead just use reframing to talk yourself down faster. That way, instead of having an imposter life, you can have an imposter moment.
So the more that you do that, the more second nature it will become. But it's all very well me kind of telling you to just feel it, push through it, just crack on, do it anyway. What we're going to talk about now is some of the tips and tricks of what will help you in those moments that will, when you're feeling that self-doubt or you're feeling that feeling of being an imposter, the small things that you can do to help yourself to get through it. The way that you talk to yourself has a huge impact on your mental state. I'm sure you're all aware. If you constantly tell yourself that you're a failure and you don't know what you're doing, I'm not telling you to constantly tell yourself you're brilliant, but the more you can acknowledge the way that you are speaking to yourself in your mind, the more that you'll be able to reframe that. So if you're constantly saying, oh, what are you doing? You don't know what you're doing. You sound stupid. The more that you will think that you sound stupid, and then that's where it becomes a problem. So that's a really good one. So getting someone to hold you to account, so having an imposter syndrome or moment buddy. Journaling is a good one. Like if you empty your mind at the start or end of the day, it will help you to just get out exactly what you're feeling. It also helps you to spot patterns. If you're doing it on a regular basis, it will help you see, oh, actually, this comes up for me quite a lot, and maybe this is something I need to look at. Reducing your social media. Anyone else come off of LinkedIn and Instagram and feel like a failure? Yeah, it's tough. Setting limitations on it, maybe deleting it for a little while, but also understanding that everyone puts their best life on social media. So just because it looks like they're doing really well doesn't actually mean that they are. So acknowledging that is a good one. And staying in the moment, understanding that what you're going through is temporary and it will pass, not looking too far into the future. So if anyone else have arguments with people in their head when something happens and they're like, oh, I'm going to have an argument. And then you have like this full-blown argument in your mind. And then actually when you talk to them, it's fine. And it's kind of dealt with, but you spend like 2-3 days ruminating. And then by the time you meet them, you're like ready for a fight. You're like, oh. So try and stay in that moment. Try not to think too far in the future about what is going to happen or what the outcomes would be. So what I'd like you to jot down now is maybe a technique that we've talked about or something that someone's mentioned. It could be something small, something big, but something that you think that you would like to start doing or stop doing from today. Okay, has everyone got something? So that's the last step. Using your toolbox of tips and tricks. There's so many things that you can start doing to help to reframe your self-doubt. And there are things that will work for you at certain moments, and there are things that just won't. What you need to do is try as many as you can, find what works for you, and then try and implement it into your daily routine and come back to it every time you're not feeling that confident. So on your notes, you should now have the imposter story that you're telling yourself, your self-sabotage type, not your dating type, your self-sabotage type, a memorable achievement, and what you're going to start or stop doing from today. I would also highly recommend, I mentioned it earlier, the book Playing Big is really helpful. There's also another book called Chatter by Ethan Cross. And all of this, by the way, Peter will follow up with notes, and there'll be links to these books as well, so you can have a look at those. So the 6 steps that we've been through today are normalizing the feeling of self-doubt. Remember that it's temporary. Recognize your behavior. Recall your achievements. Feel the fear and do it anyway. And use your toolbox of tips and tricks. It's kind of like a little cycle. Like you're always going to go through them. And each time those doubts come up for you, just come back to it again. The last thing I'll leave you with is a kind of little challenge for you. You can come to these talks and you can kind of research imposter moments, imposter syndrome. I can speak to you all day about it, giving you tips and tricks. You can talk to people about it. But ultimately, you need to hold yourself accountable for the feelings that you're having. If it is affecting your life and it's stopping you from doing things, then that's where you need to challenge yourself. Like we've talked about, a bit of self-doubt is absolutely normal and you will push through it. But you need to make sure that you are constantly challenging your own thoughts. And it's only you that will be able to change those thoughts. So you need to put the work in to it. And I will leave you with the very wise words of Michelle Obama, the former First Lady, who has spoken and written about how, as a young woman, she used to lie awake at night and ask herself, am I too loud, too much, dreaming too big? Eventually, I just got tired of always worrying about what everyone else thought of me, she said. So I decided not to listen. And I would like you to try and do the same. Thank you very much.
Elevate is a pioneering free mentoring program that has been designed with a specific goal in mind: to inspire, inform, and empower people within the events industry. Elevate and this podcast is powered by the generosity of our partners and supporters. We are Collider, Our Live, The Hoxton, Special Source, The Venue Group, the Association of British Professional Conference Organisers, Castle Bell, Event Decision, Times 10 and TRO. Together, we're changing lives, careers and the events industry for the better.